Okay, so corporate sustainability reporting is everywhere, right? But here's the catch. There's a huge credibility problem. A lot of people just don't trust the data. Today, we're going to dig into why that is and how a new framework called Sector Standards is trying to fix it by making reporting way more honest and, actually comparable. Let's get into it. First, we'll unpack this whole crisis of trust that's really shaking the system. Then we'll introduce the solution, GRI's sector standards, and see how they create a powerful new baseline. After that, we'll look at the one rule that prevents companies from hiding the bad news. And finally, see how it all leads to what really matters: better, more reliable data for everyone. All right, so first up, the credibility crisis. It's kind of weird, right? On one hand, you have more companies than ever putting out these super polished, glossy sustainability reports. But at the exact same time, everyone from investors to the public is getting more and more skeptical about what's actually inside them. And that forces you to ask a pretty blunt question. Is the whole thing just broken? I mean, when reports are all over the place, impossible to compare, and filled with cherry-picked good news, they kind of lose their power to drive any real meaningful change. And you can see how this becomes a vicious cycle. If the data is inconsistent, well, it's impossible to compare company A with company B. And that just opens the door for cherry picking, where companies only report on the good stuff. The result? A system that really lacks transparency, which makes it almost impossible for anyone to trust the data they're being handed. So how do we fix this? Well, the Global Reporting Initiative, or GRI, has developed a really targeted solution for these exact problems. They're called sector standards, and they're designed to bring back credibility right where it's needed most. So what are they, exactly? Well, think of GRI sector standards as a way to bring clarity and consistency to reporting within a specific industry. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. The whole idea is that different sectors have completely different impacts, so they need different rules. These sector standards are the crucial middle piece in GRI's system. It's kind of like building blocks. You start with the universal standards. That's the foundation for everybody. Then you layer on the specific sector standard for your industry. And finally, you use topic standards for the really granular details. It all fits together. Now here's the kicker, and this is so important. This isn't a suggestion. If there's a sector standard for your industry and you want to say your report follows the GRI standards, you have to use it. It is absolutely mandatory. This rule is designed to level the playing field, so companies can't just decide to skip the tough topics. So how do these standards actually work in practice? Well, they create a consistent baseline, making sure that all companies in a sector are finally being measured with the same yardstick. At the heart of every sector standard is this list of what they call likely material topics. Now, this isn't some random list they pulled out of a hat. It's a list developed with tons of input from different experts and stakeholders that pinpoints the biggest impacts an industry usually has. It's basically the starting point for what everyone expects to see. And this table shows you just how specific this can get. Take a look at biodiversity. Both mining and agriculture have it as a likely material topic, but what they're expected to report is totally different. For mining, it's all about sensitive ecosystems around the mine. For agriculture, it might be about making sure farmed fish don't escape. And then you have topics that are completely unique, like mine closure for one and soil health for the other. It is really important to clarify, though, that this baseline doesn't let a company off the hook from doing its own homework. A company still has to look at its own unique situation to figure out what's material. The standards are there as a powerful guide and a backstop, not a substitute for that process. And this brings us to the secret sauce, the rule that truly changes the game. This is the mechanism that's designed to finally put an end to that selective reporting, that cherry-picking, once and for all. Okay, so you might be wondering, but wait, what if a topic on that big list just isn't relevant to my specific company? That's a totally fair question. And the answer is what makes this system so clever. See, before, if a topic was inconvenient or made a company look bad, they could just not mention it. And stakeholders were left in the dark, with no idea if the issue is irrelevant or just being hidden. Now, with sector standards, companies have to publicly account for every single likely material topic on their list. There's nowhere to hide. This is what they call the explain why mandate. Here's how it works. A company has to review that whole list of topics. If it decides one of them, say water and effluents, isn't material for them, they can't just ignore it. No, they are required to list that topic in their report's index and publicly explain why it was excluded. That one little rule adds a massive layer of transparency and forces companies to justify their choices out in the open. So what does all this add up to? What's the end game here? It's pretty simple, actually. Better data that leads to much, much better decisions for everyone. You can see how it all connects. You create a common baseline, and right away, the data becomes more consistent and comparable. That makes it way harder for companies to cherry pick or greenwash, which in turn builds trust with stakeholders. And when people actually trust the data, they can finally use it to make truly informed decisions, whether you're an investor analyzing risk or an activist holding a company accountable. And who benefits from all this better data? Well, pretty much everybody. Investors get the clarity they need to really assess performance. Regulators can track an entire industry's progress way more effectively. And civil society groups can hold companies' feet to the fire. It just creates a more transparent, honest ecosystem for all of us. So this all leads to the big question, greenwashing. That whole practice of making misleading claims about environmental performance, it thrives in the dark, where there are no clear rules or ways to compare. By creating a mandatory, transparent baseline for what companies must report on, have we finally found the tool to end it for good? The potential is absolutely there, but it's all going to come down to how well these standards are applied and enforced. Thanks for watching.